Hello and welcome to another blog. This is a subject which divides the community, the sailing community, as much as Brexit divided the British community and Trump divides the American community. So this is like the Trump-Brexit debate of the sailing world. It's the Monohull versus Catamaran debate.
You and me, we're family. The bond that we share is as deep as the sea. No matter how rough things may come to be, you and me, we're family. Sing ho, hey, along for the ride. Ho, hey,
Okay, so our kids, currently aged 13, 10 and nearly 8, keep telling us, have always told us that we should have bought a catamaran. We didn't, we got a monohull. So this is all about why we did that. So it's really kind of why we got a monohull and why other people get monohulls. We're also going to have a look at a really nice cat as well. Firstly, I guess we should tell you that we really nearly did buy a catamaran. In fact, we even put a deposit on one, but we didn't go ahead with the sale. There is more than one reason why we bought a monohull instead of a catamaran. Comfort. A lot of people say that catamarans are more comfortable. They're flat, you can still play with your Lego when you're underway, and people don't get so seasick because you're not heeling over. This is Rachel's on their 42-foot lagoon.
It's absolutely incredible. It doesn't heel. We do hobby horse a little bit in rough weather, but I clean, I cook underway, I play with Bella. She's an Italian mountain dog.
She's amazing.
She's amazing on the boat.
Our beautiful Bella.
I've got a bit of glass around, which I shouldn't on a boat. Ooh. So I do put, I've got a box and bubble wrap, so I do put them away.
Okay. To be quite honest, I still felt sick when I was on the catamaran that we hired, and I could smell the diesel coming from 2 of the engines.
Because the catamaran represents a flat space pushing through the wind, you get this kind of vortex effect behind, particularly when you're motoring to wind, and that brings the fumes from the diesel engine back into the cockpit.
I'm Rob, a couple of boats down from Urenco and Woody, and they're having a discussion about catamarans and monohulls, and I thought I'd join in as I've been fortunate enough to own both. I bought it because of the space and because I thought it was going to be a nice stable platform to take myself and my son down to the Mediterranean. However, there are a few drawbacks to having a catamaran. The catamaran having 2 hulls was a really strange motion. When a wave hits a monohull, it hits the boat and then it goes through. When it hits the catamaran, there's 2 holes for it to hit. Hits the first one and a moment later it hits the second one. It's a really strange feeling. And I've been sailing for about 40 years, but I never felt seasick until I went onto the catamaran.
Obviously, a catamaran has a lot shallower draft and you can go much closer to shore. A monohull, you're further out in a bay, which means then you're going to get more swell possibly. It's further to get to shore.
So places like the Caribbean where you've got a lot of shallow reefs and you want to get closer to the shore, catamaran wins out, hands down.
Oh, I don't think
Catamarans. As you can see, when I said that it divided the sailing community, the catamaran and monohull debate also divides the crew.
Yeah. Space. Okay, this is actually, I think the catamaran, yes, it does have a lot more space. It is a massive platform, loads of cabins, loads of living space. Yeah, they definitely win out, I think, on space. This is, what we could call like the patio. And then if you go inside, you've got another whole living space in there where Rachel is. So that's, there's 2 spaces and it's all on one level as well.
A lot of space to sit when we're entertaining, which we like to.
Yeah. So I think this is going to be really difficult because having seen this boat now, yet again, I find it hard to say, what's not good about a cat and why we bought monohull. But
not only is there more space, but it's nicely divided up. Whereas in a monohull, you've basically got a tube where you've got to pass through everybody's space.
Yeah, and generally, I suppose even with 3 kids, you're all going to get your own cabin or one massive cabin to share. So space, I would say, wins out on a catamaran. So that's not why we bought a monohull, because of the space.
So also the storage space and getting to things on a catamaran is a lot easier. With a monohull, you tend to have deeper bilges, and you've got to reach down and to get things, where in the Catamaran you've got two shallow hulls which are a lot easier to get to.
But on a monohull, you can store a lot more stuff and take a lot more weights, because I remember when we were looking, we heard that, you know, the heavier your catamaran is, the slower it goes. You don't kind of win out on the speed then. So, yeah, you can't. I think you can carry more on a monohull.
Another inch of depth on a monohull doesn't make that much difference to its cutting through the water, but on a catamaran, it kind of spreads it out a bit and sits deeper in the water, so you get a lot of slapping underneath as well. So that's another aspect to a catamaran sailing that you don't get on a monohull.
You have a constant slamming when you're going anything towards the wind on the catamaran, and you can just feel all day, 24 hours a day, slam, slam, slam into the waves.
Yeah, so I suppose access is better for a catamaran when you're storing stuff, but then the amount of stuff you can take is not as good. Staying safe, I mean, some people say that a catamaran is pretty much flat, so you're never going to go overboard. When I went out on the catamaran with our kids, they were younger, they were jumping about on the trampoline, and I was actually worried that it was so wide that I couldn't, it's like, keep them contained. I wanted somewhere where I could keep them really contained, which is why I actually like our boat even better than some other monohulls, because it's got such a deep cockpit.
One thing that monohull advocates say about catamarans is once it's flipped, it's upside down, and there's no righting it. Whereas a monohull, because of the weight of the keel, will do a full 360. Once it's upside down, its natural position is to right itself. There aren't that many reports of catamarans flipping, and once it does flip, it also acts as a life raft. It doesn't sink because it doesn't rely on the weight in the keel to hold it steady in the water. A lot of different types of monohulls. Some boats, like our boat, like the Amel, the keel is fiberglassed into the mould, and the only place where it's not is right at the bottom, where there's a steel sort of wing bulb, which has got 16 through bolts into the bottom of the keel, which is pretty much as tough as you can get, which is why Amels have got the reputation of being the toughest production boats. So I don't think we need to worry about that too much.
I don't know, I think they're safer. Should I say anything about that? Blue water cruising boat.
Why do you think it's safer?
Monohull, it's not got two hulls to act opposite to each other.
Safety on the boat also brings us onto big seas, really. Now, I wanted to, because we want to do a circumnavigation, I wanted to see a catamaran out there in big seas, and I was looking, while Woody was out looking at the catamaran, what we put a deposit on, I was looking on YouTube videos trying to find it, and the only footage I really found was Delos actually on their Amel, and they were out going around the Cape of Good Hope in big seas, and I kind of just thought, well, that is the boat that could handle it. I really wanted a boat that could handle anything, because, you know, we want to do all sorts of things. So I'm not sure I would want to be out on a catamaran in big seas, really, even though, yeah, you reef down. It's just, I don't know.
I found with the catamaran also there was a reliance on the instruments, whereas on a sailboat you can stand there, you can feel the wind, and you can feel the boat start to lean and heel, and you react accordingly. In the catamaran you don't necessarily have that, because you're normally enclosed within a confined cockpit, and you rely on the instruments all the time to tell you when to start thinking about reefing the sails.
When it comes to catamarans and heavy seas, the bigger the catamaran the better, because the more length, the more wider it is, so it's spread out more evenly along over the water, so there's less chance of capsizing. The only problem that is you've got a very vulnerable sort of bridge deck in the middle, where if the waves are the frequency at a certain frequency, then they can slap underneath, and that again can cause structural integrity problems.
I talked to a few people and who have catamarans, and they understand this idea about the twisting of the hulls and the concern that it can have within the structure. And I think you find surveyors over so many years, they're looking at the age of the boat, and they're looking at concerns around those areas, and people have had to have superstructure sort of reinforced, and that seems a concern to me.
After we looked into the build quality of cats, a lot of them are actually built for the charter market, and for the type of cat we wanted and for the size, it was way outside of our budget. You get more boat for your money buying a monohull, and there's a lot more on the market. Yeah, the sailing of the catamaran and the monohull is very different, and it has to be said, I mean, it's common knowledge that a monohull you do feel the boat a lot more, and that counts for a lot particularly with experienced sailors. You know, you can tell whether you're being overpowered. You can tell when the wind's picking up just by the feel of the boat.
I found the sailing performance on a catamaran to be really poor upwind. So anything where the wind was forward of the beam was really difficult to try and make headway. So invariably I ended up motoring a lot more than I would do normally or would do on a monohull.
So when we chartered our catamaran, we found it really hard to sail upwind at a very good angle. It was probably 60 degrees or worse. And, you know, that kind of bothered me because I thought, well, sometimes you do have to go upwind, even though it's uncomfortable, even on a monohull. But I just,
even with that angle, the leeway was quite heavy. So even though we kind of pointed reasonably well, the leeway was taking us back, and so we were trying to tack up this channel and ended up just going backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
As you start to point the boat anything towards the wind, she slams and you get a lot of leeway. Obviously, modern catamarans, performance ones with dagger boards, are a lot better. However, you're still trying to move two big holes with a big side face through the wind. It's difficult.
I mean, again, we didn't have a performance cat, so, you know, something like a Katana and some of those really good ones, I'm sure that would improve, but it wasn't very good for us. So
Well, it has to be said that a lot of the more expensive catamarans, like the Katanas and the Ultramares, they do have the drop keels, which sticks the keel further in the water, which makes them bite up to wind, so you get a better angle and less leeway.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we thought we'd get a cat is because they've got two engines. If one fails, you've got the other, which is kind of comforting in a way, although trying to manoeuvre on a cat with one engine, I think, is quite difficult.
I found actually trying to manoeuvre it in marinas was a real challenge. Any sort of crosswind on the beam, it made things quite difficult.
So you've got the expense as well of two engines to maintain, time and the money to buy two filters, to everything really. So cost, I think overall, there's things like, obviously you go in a marina, then you will often get charged double the price because you've got a cat, or a length and a half. A lot of people do say it can be quite pricey, depending on where you are.
And going to marinas, they would charge me at least 1.5 times the price.
The comparisons with a 53-foot monohull like ours wouldn't be comparable with a 53-foot cat, because if you wanted the same amount of space, you'd probably get about a 45-foot cat.
So basically, I think what we're saying is you don't need such a big cat, and therefore, you know, you're not going to be paying so much. But that depends if you want a smaller cat. And when we were looking for a cat, we didn't want to go less than 45 foot because we didn't want to be out in the big seas on a small cat. So I think, cost was probably one of the biggest reasons why we didn't get one. I mean, the other reason is that, you know, to buy the actual boat in the first place, they're all a lot more expensive to buy a cat than it is to buy a monohull initially. What do you think about the look of catamaran versus monohull, Woody?
They don't look like sailing boats. They look more like sort of condos on the water with a pole sticking out the top.
Yeah, and I agree. I do prefer the look of a monohull. It's always, you know, I find it quite attractive. It isn't the most important thing on the list, to be quite honest. Now a lot more people have cats and they're becoming more normal now. I mean, so you're probably more used to seeing a cat and you don't really think twice about what it looks like.
The Caribbean is really set up for catamarans. They've got reefs which catamarans can get over. There's loads of really spacious anchorages, whereas in Europe there is less anchorages. They're smaller, more crowded, and the ports are generally the places you want to go, like Greece and Ibiza and places like that. They tend to be smaller fishing harbours, and you stick a few cats in there and the whole space has been taken up.
I think the other reason, apart from cost, that we got a monohull is because, I mean, I feel more confident on a monohull. I kind of can feel it. I know what I'm doing. I know when the sails need to be reefed. Even when we cut through the waves, I feel I know what I'm doing with it.
One of the surprising things for me is I didn't really think that the feeling of the sail was that important. I thought it was more important to get the space and the platform and everything else. But when I test sailed a cat, well, the one we were going to buy actually, I was amazed at how flat the feeling was when the sails were up, and when the wind catches the sails and you get into that groove of the monohull. It's a really lovely feeling. With a cat, it just didn't happen. There was nothing. It was almost like watching a film in black and white. You know, it was missing something, and it wasn't something I really thought about before until it wasn't there anymore. I still don't think it's a reason not to buy a cat. but it was more important than I thought it would be.
If you want to go sailing, you go on a yacht. This is a yacht, yeah. And so yeah, let's have the monohulls all the way.
Yeah.
The reason we pulled out of the sale for the cat that we were going to buy, it wasn't for any one particular reason, but it came down to two things. I think it was our budget wouldn't let us buy a cat with the build quality that we needed to circumnavigate, and the feeling of the sail, this feeling that, or the lack of feeling that you get when you're selling a catamaran compared to a monohull.
Yeah, and the confidence that gives you, you know, or gives me anyway.
I actually got rid of the catamaran as soon as I got to the Mediterranean because the sailing ability and the cost was just too much. And I wanted to go back to proper sailing again. I wanted to go back, feel the wind in my face and actually feel the boat react to the wind. So I went for a monohull and I went to an Amel, which are probably the best sailboats going.
So in the end, we went for the most solid blue water cruiser monohull that we could afford, and so we ended up with our Amel, and obviously you can see a whole tour of that. And yeah, it is solid, and it's the cockpit I particularly like. It's deep, it's safe, and with kids it's perfect really.
It might be different for people who've got different plans and different circumstances.
Yeah, but then a family cruising boat, nothing nicer than a cat, the space you have.
So if we could sail across oceans in a monohull and then live on a cat at anchor, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Hey, Andy.
Like a cat.
Yeah, you like that.
Monohulls.
But why monohulls? Why?
Because monohulls are really cool.
You and me.
So thanks for watching, and thanks in particular to our patrons who make these videos possible. Without your support, they wouldn't happen.
No matter how rough things may come to be, you and me, we're family. Sing ho.
We would really love to hear from you, so you could go over to the Patreon page or even the Facebook page and leave comments there.
By your side, oh. Hey, you'll always be alright by me.
Let's go for a fight today.
What?